Hello, my name is Odessa Alvarez. Yes, the one from that viral interview. The one whose husband got my cousin pregnant. The one whose parents kicked her out of her own house so they could play happy family with a liar and a thief. You think you know betrayal? Sit down. I'll show you what it means to be erased by the people who raised you, smiling the whole time. The sun was already dipping behind the roofs of the Sacramento cul-de-sac when I pulled into my parents' driveway. The porch light was on, even though it wasn't dark yet, a habit my mother never had. The small things catch you first. The scent of cinnamon drifted through the open window, mixed with the sharp tang of lemon polish. It was the smell of my childhood Sundays, and it hit me like a memory that had been waiting in ambush. I pushed open the front door, calling out a faint, "Mom?" My voice disappeared into a house too quiet to be normal. Then I saw it, Leora's handbag, expensive and unfamiliar, sitting on the entry bench where I used to drop my school backpack. A scarf I'd never seen before hung from the coat rack. I froze, suitcase still in hand, listening for footsteps upstairs. Nothing, just the clinking of plates somewhere down the hall. When I walked into the dining room, the lights were softer than usual, the table dressed like company was coming. Every fork gleamed, every napkin folded in the shape of a rose. My mother never went that far unless she was nervous or showing off. Leora turned when she heard me. She was seated at the head of the table, my father's chair, and her hands rested on the curve of her belly. The swell was small but unmistakable. My heart stuttered. "Oh, Odessa," my mother said, voice too bright, "we didn't know you'd get in so early." I stared at her, then at the place sitting beside Leora. A small card lay by the plate. Not my name. Hers. My own tag had been pushed to the far end of the table, taped awkwardly over the wood with a sticker that said Leora. "You've redecorated," I said, though it came out more like a gasp than a joke. "Just freshening things up," my father muttered, without meeting my eyes. Dinner started without anyone asking if I was hungry. They spoke in loops about vitamins, doctor visits, morning sickness. I chewed air and listened to the silverware. I used to sit in the middle, I thought, watching the way my mother leaned toward Leora, her smile gentle and proud. Now I'm orbiting them like Pluto, technically part of the family, but too far to matter. When Leora reached for the salt, her sleeve slid up, and I recognized the cardigan. My cardigan, the one I left in the guest closet last Thanksgiving. I couldn't stop looking at it, the faint wine stain on the cuff, the one from a night when Marlon and I laughed too loudly over cheap Merlot. "Leora's been helping around the house," my mother said suddenly, as if reading my stare. "She's family. She needs a calm environment right now." "Right now," I echoed. My voice cracked on the second word. Leora smiled faintly, fingers circling her belly. "The first trimester's almost over," she said. "We didn't want to say anything until it was safe." "Safe," I repeated. The word burned on the way out. My mother placed her hand over Leora's. "You've always been the strong one, Odessa. You understand." Something in me went silent. Not numb, just emptied. I looked at the faces I thought I knew, all lit by the soft gold glow of the chandelier. They were acting out a scene rehearsed without me. "Who's the father?" I asked. The question sliced through the polite noise like a dropped glass. No one answered. My father coughed into his napkin. My mother's eyes darted to the floor. And then I saw it, the ring on Leora's chain. My wedding band. The room spun, but no one moved. Leora looked at my mother and said softly, "She'll understand, right, Aunt Maylis?" My mother nodded, still not meeting my eyes. She always does. The scrape of my chair echoed louder than any reply I could have given. I wanted to shout, to demand truth, but all that came was a whisper. I haven't been forgotten. I've been erased. My father started to speak, something about mistakes, about timing, but I was already walking away. The hallway light flickered as I passed the framed photographs. In each one, the story had shifted slightly. Leora at birthdays that weren't hers. Leora holding the family dog. I wasn't sure when my face had started fading from the collection. In the kitchen, the leftover dishes steamed quietly, releasing that same cinnamon lemon smell that once meant home. Now it smelled like a cover-up. I pressed my palm to the countertop just to feel something solid. Leora's laugh floated from the dining room, soft and intimate. It was a laugh I used to know. I thought about saying something, one last line that could carve my name back into the air, but nothing fit. Some silences are too wide to cross. I grabbed my suitcase from the hall and opened the front door. The cool air hit me like truth. Behind me, my mother's voice rose, muffled but clear. She'll be fine. She always lands on her feet. Outside, the sky was turning that bruised shade between orange and purple. I stood on the porch, the smell of cinnamon still clinging to my coat, and realized I couldn't breathe inside that house anymore. This isn't my family anymore. I'm just the background in their new portrait. I didn't slam the door behind me. I just left it open, so they could feel the absence. The night air swallowed me whole, but it wasn't cold. Not yet. I stood in the driveway for a full minute before realizing I was still holding the doorknob in my left hand, as if part of me hadn't accepted I'd actually walked out. I let go. The light from the kitchen window bled onto the porch, casting soft shadows that moved when someone walked inside. Their lives continued. My exit didn't halt the meal. No one came after me. Looking back now, I should have known the silence was their answer. That's where it all started. I walked around to the side of the house, gravel crunching under my boots, to the kitchen door. I didn't want to leave without asking him, without hearing it from his mouth. Not for closure, just confirmation. The kitchen was dim, the overhead bulb flickering like it hadn't been changed in years. He stood in front of the open refrigerator, one hand on the door, staring at nothing. "Is it true?" I asked. He didn't flinch, didn't turn. I stepped forward, keeping my voice even. "Is the baby hers?" The cold hum of the fridge filled the room. A fan kicked on behind the wall. He closed the door slowly, still not looking at me. Still no answer. "I want to hear it from you, Marlon." He leaned both hands on the counter, head bowed like he was praying or hiding. I didn't mean for it to happen, he muttered. His voice was cracked glass. "That's not a no." He didn't deny it, didn't defend it, just stood there like someone waiting to be sentenced. I didn't need more. The truth was already screaming in the spaces he refused to fill. Looking back, that was the moment I stopped asking for explanations. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I turned and walked back down the hall, heart thudding in my ears. The living room was quiet again, dishes cleared, my seat empty. I kept walking past the photos of a family I no longer belonged to, until I reached the guest room door. A pale pink envelope had been slipped under it. My name wasn't on it. It just said, "You're invited." I stared at it for a full minute before bending down. The card inside was thick, embossed, tasteful. "You're cordially invited to celebrate Leora's baby shower. It was being hosted here, in this house. RSVP to Maëlys." I sat down on the edge of the bed, fingers trembling slightly. The baby shower was scheduled for 2 weeks from now. They had it all planned before I even knew, before I was allowed to know. They had a celebration lined up for a child conceived under my roof with the man I was still married to, and they had the audacity to send me an invitation. No, not to invite me, to inform me. I heard the shuffle of steps outside the door. My father passed by, not stopping, not looking in, just walking the hall like a man used to living among secrets. I'd been uninvited from my own life. I thought, tracing the raised print of Leora's name on the card. All that remained was the courtesy of silence. That's when I knew. No one was going to fix this for me, and they weren't going to stop me either. I pulled out the suitcase I hadn't unpacked yet. It was still by the wall. The tags for my business trip were still attached. I moved slowly at first, folding my sweater, checking my charger, grabbing my files. Not rushing, not dramatic. Packing didn't feel like defeat. It felt like dignity. When I zipped the suitcase shut, it echoed louder than any words I could have thrown. The hallway lights dimmed as I rolled the suitcase out. Its wheels bumped across the floor like soft drums at a wake. No one tried to stop me. No voice called out. Not even the dog barked. They were letting me go. Or maybe they already had. I passed the front hall, pausing only to glance at the invitation again. It was tucked in my coat pocket now, soaking up the sweat from my palm. As I opened the door, a gust of wind tugged at my coat. Rain had started, light but steady, the kind that didn't soak right away but promised to. I stepped onto the porch, letting the screen door close behind me. I looked back once, not because I was unsure, but because I needed to remember the last time I stood in that doorway as someone who belonged. The rain kissed my cheeks, and I tightened my grip on the handle of my suitcase. I clutched the invitation in my left hand. The ink was already smearing. I didn't slam the door behind me. I just left it open so they could feel the absence. The rain kept falling as I reached the car. Each drop hit the roof with the patience of a clock ticking down a life I'd outgrown. I opened the door, slid into the driver's seat, and waited for the trembling to stop. The porch light behind me flickered once, then steadied. No one came to the doorway. No one shouted my name. I started the engine, letting the heater hum against the wet silence. Through the windshield, I could see the second floor window glowing. Leora stood there, framed by my old curtains. She was wearing my cardigan again, the same one she had worn at dinner, sleeves pulled over her hands like she owned comfort itself. Her face didn't show guilt, only a soft, distant pity, like she was the one watching someone leave a funeral. I wasn't kicked out. I was released from a role I never auditioned for. That's what it felt like. I pulled out of the driveway slowly, the tires hissing over puddles. The streetlights blurred into streaks of gold through the rain. I told myself I'd drive until the car ran out of gas, until distance made this night small. But I only made it to a small motel by the highway, the kind with humming neon letters missing half their bulbs. Inside, the air smelled like bleach and old coffee. I dropped my suitcase near the wall and sat on the edge of the bed. The sheets were thin and cold. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the sound of cars rushing past, people going somewhere else, people who still had somewhere to go. Looking back now, I should have called someone, maybe a friend or my coworker Jenna. But shame is a quiet jail. You lock the door yourself and pretend it's safer that way. I didn't sleep. The rain softened near dawn, leaving the air heavy and gray. I turned on my phone, half hoping there'd be a message from my mother, an apology, anything that would prove I hadn't imagined the cruelty. There were no missed calls, no texts. I opened our family group chat instead. It used to be filled with recipes, reminders about Dad's doctor visits, pictures of birthdays. I scrolled up trying to remember the last message I'd sent, a photo of the Thanksgiving table from 2 years ago, everyone laughing. The message below it now said, "You left the group." Only I hadn't. The chat name had changed. New beginnings. The profile picture was a photo of Leora holding a mug, her other hand on her belly. My mother had commented underneath it with a heart emoji. My father had reacted with a thumbs up. It wasn't that they forgot me. They deleted me, then celebrated the empty space. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then I laughed, one dry, hollow sound that didn't feel like mine. Some endings don't need closure. They just need confirmation. I set the phone on the nightstand and sat there a while, feeling the faint hum of the highway through the floor. I thought about all the times my mother had said, "Family sticks together." I wondered when she decided I no longer counted as family. The clock hit 9. I forced myself to shower, to move, to exist. When I came out, steam filling the small bathroom, the phone screen was glowing again. No new messages, just the same group icon. Leora's smile frozen mid-laugh. I picked up the phone and dialed my mother's number. Once, twice, 3 times. Each call went to voicemail. Her voice played in the same calm tone I'd grown up with. "You've reached Maylise. Leave a message, and please don't make things harder for the family." That sentence broke something in me. Please don't make things harder for the family. The family that had just replaced me. I didn't hang up. I just listened to the silence on the line, the soft static, the breath between words. It felt like standing in a church after the congregation. Leaves, echoes without meaning. I whispered, "You made this hard enough," and ended the call. The sun was rising outside, pale and indifferent. I opened the curtains and watched light spill across the parking lot. A mother walked by holding her little boy's hand, both laughing about something I couldn't hear. It looked so simple, so distant. That morning, I decided I wouldn't beg to be remembered. If they could erase me that easily, I could learn to live without their version of love. I looked at my phone one last time. The group chat blinked with new messages, plans for the weekend, a reminder about prenatal vitamins, hearts, and smiley faces. None of it included me. I deleted the entire conversation, held the power button until the screen went black, and let the silence settle around me like a blanket. I didn't hang up. I just listened to the silence and let it become my witness. When I turned the phone off that morning, the room felt heavier, as if the silence had a weight of its own. I sat there a long time, watching the motel curtain breathe with the rhythm of passing cars. The air smelled like rain and leftover coffee, but mostly it smelled like endings. Then my phone buzzed once. An alert from a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. "Is this real?" she'd written. Beneath the message was a link. I almost ignored it. Almost. Curiosity is cruel when you're grieving. It always promises relief and delivers bruises. I clicked. It was my wedding photo, or what was left of it. The same frame, same backdrop, the oak trees behind the church, the string lights. I had hung myself, but I wasn't in it anymore. The image had been cropped so cleanly that even the shadows didn't hint I'd ever been there. Leora and Marlon stood centered, smiling, his hand over her growing belly. The caption read, "Soulmates find each other." My throat closed around a breath that wouldn't come. I'd stood there once, wearing the same dress she was now using for her announcement picture. I could still feel the fabric against my skin, the heat of his palm at my back, the lie of forever whispered in the vows. I stood there once. I was the bride. Now I'm just a ghost with a wedding album full of strangers. Looking back, I should have known this was never about love. It was about ownership, about rewriting the story. So I disappeared neatly from the family scrapbook. I called Jenna, an old co-worker who'd been my sounding board through years of quiet storms. "You're not crazy," she said before I could even explain. "It's all over Facebook. People are congratulating them like this isn't the ugliest thing they've ever seen." "Of course they are," I whispered. "People love a redemption story." After hanging up, I sat for another hour. No tears. Just a steady pulse of disbelief. I thought about deleting every photo of my marriage, every trace of what I had built, but I left them there. Let the truth rot online beside the lie. That's where it all started. By noon, I was at Soren's office. The law firm was small, tucked behind a strip mall, the kind of place that smelled like printer ink and burned coffee. He'd been my lawyer when I bought the house years ago. He didn't ask how I was. He just looked at me for a long second and said, "What do you want me to do?" "I want to make sure they can't take another thing from me." Soren nodded. "Then we start with what's yours." He opened a folder on his desk, pages clipped neatly. "You'll want to see this," he said, sliding an email across the table. It was from Marlon's account, dated 2 months before I found out. Subject, Property Adjustment Inquiry. He'd contacted another lawyer, asking how to transfer ownership of the house to himself after a mutual separation. There was no mutual anything. He'd been preparing the ground long before the truth came out. My chest burned as I read. So he planned it. "He was betting on your silence," Soren said, leaning back. I looked up at him, my hands steady for the first time in days. He just lost that bet. He smiled slightly, a sad sort of approval. "We'll file the notice today. Keep your receipts, your accounts. I'll handle the rest." It wasn't vengeance that drove me, it was clarity. Silence had been my mistake, and I wouldn't make it twice. Driving back to the motel, I replayed every conversation from the last year. The missed dinners, the late nights he said he was writing. The way my mother had started saying, "You work too hard. Honey, maybe let someone else take care of you for once." They'd been moving the chess pieces while I was still learning the rules. I pulled into the motel parking lot just as the sun was dipping low again, casting long gold lines over the cracked pavement. I took a deep breath, opened my phone, and stared at Leora's profile picture, her smile as polished as the ring around her finger. My ring. I typed a message. Short, precise. You can have the cardigan, but the house, that's mine. I didn't hit send right away. I stared at the words until they stopped shaking. Then I pressed my thumb down and watched the message disappear into the void between us. A few minutes later, the screen lit up with her reply. I'm not trying to hurt you. Mom said you'd understand eventually. I laughed out loud, the sound sharp and tired. Eventually, I repeated to the empty room. She still thinks I'm made of forgiveness. I turned off the phone and stood by the window, watching traffic flow past. People in other cars, other lives, moving forward without ever looking back. I let her think I was broken. That's the best time to move, when they're sure you can't. Morning sunlight sliced through the motel curtains, too bright, too clean. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. The silence felt unfamiliar. No voices, no footsteps, no fake apologies echoing through the hall. I rolled over, grabbed my phone, expecting nothing. But there it was, a notification. Leora had tagged me. The caption on her post read, "For the first time, I'm loved for who I really am." 63 likes. My mother's red heart. My father's comment, "Proud of you both." Not a single mention of me. I opened the post. She stood in front of my house, draped in my cardigan, the one she swore she lost, hand gently resting on her stomach, head tilted just enough to seem soft. Marlon stood beside her, smiling like he used to with me. The porch light glowed behind them, casting a warm aura that didn't belong to either of them. It felt like watching someone act out a play using the life I had built. Something inside me cracked, quietly. No screams. No broken glass. Just a long, bitter breath. I turned the phone face down and sat on the edge of the bed. The clock ticked like a warning. I didn't feel sadness anymore. Around 10, another alert came through, this time from the bank. Fraud alert, $1,200 at Baby World Outlet. My heart thumped once, hard. Then the email landed. Order confirmation, crib nursery set, shipping to my old address. Billing? My name. I called the store, trying to sound calm. "Oh, yes, Ms. Alvarez," the manager said brightly. "Your niece said you were helping with the nursery. Lovely girl." Niece. My blood ran cold. I asked for security footage. He hesitated, then emailed me a still. Leora stood at the register, beaming, my card in hand. She had used my customer account, my name, my rewards, my email. She was building a nursery in a house I paid for, and no one saw a problem. I leaned against the wall, phone shaking in my hand. I wanted to call my mother to ask if this was really how far they'd go to erase me, but I already knew the answer. I checked the time, 10:30. Then I called Soren. He picked up instantly. "Odessa, I was expecting your call. How soon can we begin?" "I've prepared everything." He said, "The house is yours. The deed is under your name. We'll file the eviction notice today." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Do it." He paused. "You ready?" "I'm past ready. They've underestimated you," he said gently, "the woman who paid for everything." I smiled, but there was no warmth. "Now, they'll pay the difference." We reviewed the legal process. I took notes, steady hands hiding the storm inside. After we hung up, I stared at the page. My handwriting looked calmer than I felt. Lunch came from the diner next door. I chewed without tasting. Outside, the sky faded to a dull gray, like the day itself had given up caring. Mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed again. An email from my mother. No greeting, just one line. Please stop creating tension. Leora is family. The baby deserves peace. I laughed. Out loud. The sound startled even me. Peace. I muttered, "You want peace after stealing the roof from over my head?" I replied with only one sentence, "The baby will have peace. Just not in my house." Then I deleted the thread. That wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. An hour later, Soren called back. "It's done. The eviction notice will be delivered tomorrow morning." I didn't feel rage, just calm, like standing in the eye of a hurricane. Later that night, I checked Leora's page one more time. She posted again, baby clothes laid out neatly on the bed, captioned with, "New beginnings blessed." I didn't comment, didn't like, didn't report. I whispered to my phone, "The baby you're celebrating is coming into a house that legally belongs to me." Then I packed my bag, wrote a list of everything I'd retrieve once the notice was served, and stood by the window. The headlights on the freeway passed in silence, like tiny reminders that life moves forward even after betrayal. They stole so much, but this time I'm taking it back. And the countdown has begun. By the next morning, I was done waiting for anyone else to make the next move. The papers were ready, the law was on my side, and the ache in my chest had settled into something sharper, something useful. For years, I had paid for everything and asked for nothing. That ends today. Soren met me at the courthouse just after 9. The parking lot shimmered from last night's rain, and the air smelled like wet asphalt and coffee. He held a manila folder under his arm, thick with documents and proof. "The deed is still in your name," he said. "It always was. She had you sign the refinance, but it never transferred. They were counting on you not checking." I felt a strange calm wash over me, the kind that only comes when the truth stops being painful and starts becoming power. "Let's finish it," I said. Inside, the clerk printed the official eviction notice. The paper slid from the tray with a soft, mechanical hum, like a curtain opening before the final act. I signed my name, slow, deliberate. For once, I wasn't writing to beg or explain. I was authorizing reality. Soren watched me, then said quietly, "You don't have to be there when they deliver it." "I do," I replied. "This started in that house. It ends there." We drove together. The closer we got, the quieter I became. Familiar streets blurred past. The same trees, the same cracked sidewalks I used to race down as a child. Every block felt like memory pretending to be home. When we turned into the driveway, the curtains moved. They were expecting someone, but not me. The court officer met us out front, papers in hand. "Ready, ma'am?" he asked. I nodded. The front door opened before we could knock. My mother stood there, still in her robe, face pale as porcelain. Her voice trembled with outrage disguised as concern. "Odessa, you don't mean this. We're family." I didn't speak. I handed her the notice. Her hands shook as she read the header, "Notice of eviction, 48 hours to vacate premises." She looked up at me like she didn't recognize who I was. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "You're tearing this family apart." "You did that," I said softly. Behind her, Leora appeared, barefoot, clutching her stomach. She looked more offended than afraid. You can't just take the house, she snapped. Mom said you'd leave eventually. She promised me this house. I turned to her, eyes steady. I didn't promise her anything. I delivered a consequence. She blinked, the words sinking in slower than the panic spreading across her face. Odessa, please, my mother said again, stepping closer. Think about the baby. I said, that child doesn't deserve to grow up learning that betrayal has no price. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the rain dripping from the gutters. The court officer cleared his throat gently. Ma'am, I'll need your signatures here to acknowledge receipt. My mother took the pen with trembling fingers. Leora muttered under her breath, You'll regret this. I almost smiled. Maybe, but at least I'll regret something that's mine. She turned away, storming toward the stairs. My father appeared at the end of the hallway, moving slower than I remembered. He didn't say a word, just stood there, arms crossed, watching. For once, he looked at me without the veil of neutrality. There was sorrow in his eyes, but also understanding. When it was done, I stepped back outside. The air was cold, but the silence felt like applause. Looking back now, I think that was the first moment I felt free, not triumphant, not vengeful, just free. Inside, I could hear my mother's voice breaking as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. She's really doing this, Harlan. She's actually doing it. His reply was quiet, almost lost in the distance. Maybe she finally learned it from us. Soren closed his folder and handed me a copy of the notice. They'll have 48 hours. You've done everything by the book. No one can contest it. They'll try, I said. Then they'll lose. We walked toward the car. I paused halfway down the driveway, glancing back one last time. Leora stood at the window, face pressed to the glass, lips moving, though I couldn't hear the words. Maybe they were curses. Maybe they were excuses. It didn't matter. They expected noise. I brought silence and a signature. By the time I reached my apartment that evening, the rain had stopped, but the air still carried the taste of thunder. The eviction papers had been delivered hours ago. I imagined the sound of that envelope hitting the floor of my parents' hallway, the thud of reality they couldn't ignore. I hung my coat on the rack and turned on the lamp. The silence inside my apartment was comforting now. It was my silence. No more whispers behind doors. No more pretending that quiet meant peace. I was pouring tea when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a familiar face, Isolde, my mother's sister. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if the years had finally caught up with her. I hesitated, then opened the door. Odessa, she said softly, holding out a weathered envelope. I think this was meant for you. The handwriting on the front stopped me cold. My mother's looping script. Melis. I took it with trembling hands. Where did you get this? She wrote it weeks ago, Isolde said. Never mailed it. I found it in her desk when she asked me to help pack some things. She didn't want you to see it, but I think you should. I tore it open before I could change my mind. The letter was short, barely a page, but every sentence sliced deeper than the one before. I never knew how to tell you. You weren't supposed to be ours. We couldn't have children anymore. And your father thought adoption would fix what was broken. But I couldn't love what didn't come from me. I tried, Odessa. I truly did. Maybe that's why I spoiled Leora when she came along. I needed to feel what I couldn't with you. The words blurred. My fingers went cold. Isolde stepped closer, voice gentle. You were a good child. None of this was your fault. I shook my head. It explains everything. Looking back now, I realize that truth doesn't always heal. It rearranges the wound. I wasn't less loved. I whispered. I was never considered family to begin with. Isolde reached out, but I stepped back. Thank you for bringing it. She hesitated. What will you do? I folded the letter and set it on the counter. The same thing I've been doing. Finishing what they started. After she left, I sat for a long time, staring at the envelope. The handwriting looked almost kind. It made the cruelty worse. That's where it all started. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. I thought it was work, but the first message froze me in place. Jenna texted, "Turn on Facebook." Now, I did. Leora was live, her face blotchy with tears, hair disheveled. The caption read, "I'm not the villain they say I am." The comments scrolled faster than I could read them. You destroyed your cousin's life. You stole her husband. Karma's a patient teacher. Her voice trembled as she spoke. You don't understand. He said he didn't love her anymore. He said they were practically done. I thought we were building something real. Marlon's name flashed across the comments too, people tagging him, demanding answers. A few minutes later, someone posted a screenshot from his page. His relationship status, single. Leora froze mid-sentence as she saw it on the screen. The chat exploded with reactions. She tried to laugh it off, but the sound broke halfway through. Then she ended the stream abruptly. I watched without expression. She wanted attention. Now she's drowning in it. The internet moved on quickly, as it always does. But I didn't. I saved the video. Evidence comes in many forms, and sometimes the truth wears a hashtag. By noon, Soren called. "It's done," he said. "Your accounts are secure. The emergency fund is frozen, and your parents' access is revoked." "They'll notice soon," I said. "They already have," he replied. "Your father called my office this morning. He sounded defeated. I didn't ask what he said. I didn't need to know. After we hung up, I opened my banking app. For years, I'd managed their bills, their property taxes, their insurance. I'd set up auto payments, emergency coverage, all in my name. Out of habit, out of duty, out of guilt. Now it was over. Every account with their names on it, frozen. Every card they could use, canceled. Even Leora's health insurance extension, revoked. I stared at the confirmation screen. A small green check mark that meant liberation. Looking back, it's strange how quiet freedom can be. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea and read the letter again. This time, it didn't burn. It just felt empty, like a story that had finally finished telling itself. They spent years pretending I owed them everything. Now they owe each other, and I'm not paying the bill. 2 days after freezing the accounts, I woke to the sound of gravel crunching outside my gate. I lived in a small house now, nothing grand. White siding, a patch of lavender by the porch. The kind of place that didn't echo with anyone else's footsteps. Through the blinds, I saw them, my parents. They stood by the gate for a long time before one of them opened it. My father carried something folded in his hands. My mother's eyes were red. the kind that had been crying longer than the tears lasted. I didn't move. They walked halfway up the path, stopped at the edge of the porch, and just stood there. The morning light made them look older, smaller. My father set the folded object on the step. It was a baby blanket, blue, no baby. For a moment, my mother looked like she might knock. Her hand hovered near the doorbell, but never touched it. Instead, she sank to her knees, shoulders shaking. My father joined her, one hand on her back, the other gripping the blanket. They stayed that way for maybe a minute, maybe more. Then they stood up, turned, and left. I didn't open the door. Looking back, I think that was the moment I understood something simple. They finally found silence, but it wasn't the kind they wanted. That's where it all started. By afternoon, I was in the studio downtown, a place rented for interviews. A national talk show had reached out after the foundation announcement hit the local paper. They wanted me to tell my story. I wasn't sure which one they meant, the betrayal, the lawsuit, the scholarship, but I agreed. Some truths need to breathe outside their pain. The lights were warm against my face. The host smiled, that practiced sympathy television people wear like perfume. Odessa, she began, you've turned tragedy into something remarkable. What gave you the strength to do that? I could have spoken about anger, about humiliation, about nights in motel rooms staring at ceilings that didn't care. But instead, I said, we're not always born into the families that deserve us. Sometimes we have to build the ones that do. There was a pause. One of those silences producers love, the kind that feels important. The host nodded, eyes shining. That's powerful. I smiled. It's just true. We talked about the foundation, a scholarship for women who'd left toxic households, for anyone rebuilding after betrayal. I mentioned Isolde's support, the lawyer's guidance, but no one else. I didn't say my parents' names. I didn't mention Leora or Marlon. Their part of my story ended where my piece began. I gave them years. They gave me silence. I turned it into a voice. After the taping, I walked outside into the evening air. People stopped me on the street to say they'd seen the teaser. They said I was brave. I thanked them politely, but didn't linger. Bravery isn't the right word for what I did. It wasn't courage. It was necessity. Back home, I made dinner for one and turned on the TV. The interview aired just after 8. My phone started buzzing before the second commercial break. Texts, missed calls, unknown numbers. I didn't look at them. Halfway through the segment, the host's voice softened. Odessa Alvarez, she said, a reminder that healing sometimes means walking away. I muted the sound. That's when my phone rang again, my parents' number. It flashed once, twice. I let it ring. They called again. I let it. The ringing filled the room until it stopped, leaving a silence almost too pure to breathe. I picked up the remote and turned the TV volume back up for a moment just to hear my own voice echoing through the speakers. Then I pressed mute again. The phone buzzed once more on the counter. I didn't move. When you've been erased, the final power is choosing who to remember. A month passed quietly, the kind of quiet that doesn't ache anymore. My mornings settled into routine. Tea at 6, a walk to the cafe near the university, sunlight on the same cracked sidewalk I once hurried across to escape myself. Sacramento had begun to feel less like the place where I lost everything, and more like the place where I chose what stayed. The cafe, was half full that morning, the windows fogged with warmth from espresso machines and small talk. I spotted Isolde near the back, waving me over. She looked lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying a burden that wasn't hers and had finally put it down. "You look rested," she said when I sat. "I sleep now," I answered with a smile. "That helps." Between us, students hunched over scholarship forms, applications for the foundation. Their pens scratched eagerly across paper, chasing hope. Watching them filled me with a quiet pride I didn't expect. Isolde sipped her coffee. "Did you ever forgive them?" The question landed softly, but the air around it changed. I stirred my tea and thought about the months behind me, courtrooms, letters, silence, headlines. Then I said, "Forgiveness is a choice, not a duty." She nodded, eyes kind. "You sound sure." "I am. I don't need a full circle ending. I just need a clean break." We sat in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't demand filling. Outside, a bus sighed at the curb. Life moved, as it always does, in small, ordinary sounds. Looking back, I think peace doesn't come when you stop caring. It comes when you stop needing to be understood. That's where it all started. After we parted, I walked along the park that bordered the river. The air smelled like wet grass and sun-warmed wood. In my purse, something shifted. I reached in and pulled it out, a letter. The envelope was thin, addressed in my mother's hand. Postmarked 3 weeks ago. She must have mailed it after the eviction. For a long time, I had carried it everywhere, unopened. I used to think I'd need to know what was inside to finish healing. Now I wasn't so sure. I ran my thumb along the sealed edge, feeling the ridge of glue. The paper had softened from handling. I imagined what it might say. Apologies dressed in justification, pleas wrapped in guilt, the same tune played in a different key. I sat on a park bench, overlooking the water. A couple walked by with their dog, laughter drifting behind them. A breeze tugged at the letter in my hand. I loosened my grip. It fluttered, slightly caught by the wind, and I set it down beside me on the bench. Some stories don't need to be finished to be over. I stood, watching the letter for a moment longer. Then I turned and walked away. That evening, I went home and tidied the small front room. The sun poured through the window, laying a stripe of light across the floorboards. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish, the real kind this time, not the memory of it. On the wall near the door, I hung a framed quote I'd ordered the week before. The black letters stood clean against the white background. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you refuse to carry forward. For the first time in years, I liked what hung on my walls. They told my story, no one else's. I stepped outside to the porch with a cup of tea. The evening air was soft, carrying the low hum of traffic, the bark of a neighbor's dog, the smell of someone grilling 2 houses down. I watched the sky fade from gold to violet. I still thought of them sometimes, my parents, Leora, even Marlon, but only as chapters I'd already read. There was no anger left, only distance. And distance, I'd learned, can be the purest form of forgiveness. The porch light flickered on automatically. I didn't move to turn it off. I still have scars, but they no longer need explanation. Sometimes the people who raise you are the very ones who erase you. But silence can be a decision, not a defeat. What do you think defines family, blood, or the ones who choose you back? If this story made you feel something, anything, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. There are more stories coming. And trust me, they don't get any quieter.